Nestled high in the snow-capped mountains of Japan, surrounded by mist-shrouded forests and ancient pines, stood a small Zen monastery. Perched on the edge of the world, it seemed as though it existed between heaven and earth, where clouds often swept through its stone courtyards and wrapped around the wooden buildings like an ethereal blanket. Here, amidst the sound of rustling leaves and distant bird calls, monks dedicated their lives to seeking enlightenment through discipline, meditation, and the teachings of their wise masters. Among the disciples was Koji, a young monk whose heart burned with the desire for understanding. Koji was diligent and sincere. He woke before dawn each day to sit in silent meditation, his legs crossed and his back straight, attempting to quiet his restless mind. He studied the ancient sutras late into the night, his candle flickering as he pored over the teachings. And yet, despite his unwavering effort, Koji felt as though he was no closer to enlightenment than the day he had arrived. Doubt gnawed at him like a persistent insect. Why couldn't he find the stillness his master spoke of? Why did his thoughts race like a river after a storm, tumbling over rocks and crashing into unseen depths? Though Koji tried to hide his frustrations, his inner turmoil was apparent too. Master Ryo, the elder monk who had guided the monastery for decades. Ryo was known for his serene presence and profound wisdom, his words often carrying the weight of timeless truth. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the horizon in hues of amber and crimson, Koji approached Master Ryo. The elder monk sat beneath an ancient cherry tree, its blossoms scattering in the breeze like pale pink snow. His eyes were half closed, his breathing slow and steady, as if he were attuned to the rhythm of the universe itself. "Master," Koji began hesitantly, bowing low, "I am troubled. I meditate daily, study diligently, and follow all the teachings. Yet I feel no closer to enlightenment. What am I doing wrong?" Master Ryo opened his eyes, their gaze calm yet piercing. A faint smile played on his lips. "Koji," he said, his voice as gentle as the evening breeze, "meet me tomorrow at dawn, at the western cliff where the clouds gather." Koji bowed again, his confusion masked by his respect. Though he did not understand the purpose of the request, he trusted his master and resolved to obey. At first light, Koji rose from his straw mat and donned his robes. The air was crisp and cool as he made his way up the steep, winding path that led to the western cliff. The monastery gradually disappeared behind him, swallowed by the mist that blanketed the mountains. When he reached the precipice, he found Master Ryo standing at the edge, his silhouette framed by the vast expanse of sky. Before them stretched a sea of clouds, rolling and shifting like waves. The valley below was completely obscured, and the horizon seemed infinite. Koji hesitated for a moment, struck by the beauty and the vastness of the scene, before stepping forward and bowing to his master. "Master, I am here as you instructed," Koji said. Master Ryo gestured toward the clouds with a sweeping motion. "Koji," he said, "step off this cliff and walk on the clouds." Koji froze, his breath catching in his throat. Surely he had misunderstood. "Master," he said, his voice trembling, "I cannot walk on clouds. If I step off the edge, I will fall to my death." "And why are you so certain of that?" Master Ryo asked, his tone calm. "Because the clouds are only mist," Koji replied. "They cannot hold my weight. There is nothing solid beneath them." Master Ryo nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You are correct. The clouds are not solid. But tell me, Koji, is not the ground beneath your feet also impermanent? Is not everything you cling to as fleeting as these clouds?" Koji was silent, unsure how to respond. He looked down at the swirling expanse below, his heart pounding in his chest. Master Ryo stepped closer to the edge, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "If you cannot walk on the clouds, then sit and observe them," he said, motioning for Koji to join him. Reluctantly, Koji sat beside his master, their legs dangling over the precipice. The wind whispered through the pines, carrying the faint scent of dew and wildflowers. For a long time they sat in silence, watching the clouds shift and flow. At first, Koji's mind was restless, filled with questions and doubts. But as the minutes stretched into hours, something began to change. Koji noticed how the clouds moved with a natural grace, neither resisting the wind nor clinging to their forms. They merged and separated effortlessly, dissolving into the air and reappearing elsewhere. They were in constant motion, yet there was a profound stillness in their existence. The clouds did not strive to be anything other than what they were. "What do you see, Koji?" Master Ryo asked at last, breaking the silence. Koji thought for a moment before replying. "The clouds move freely without resistance. They do not fear change or dissolution. They simply exist, at peace with themselves and their nature." Master Ryo nodded. "And what about you? Are you like the clouds, or do you resist the wind?" Koji's breath caught. He realized how tightly he had been holding on to his doubts, his fears, his desire for certainty. He had clung to the idea of enlightenment as if it were a distant destination, something solid and unchanging. In doing so, he had created his own suffering. "The clouds do not seek to be anything other than what they are," Master Ryo continued. "They move, they change, they dissolve, yet they are always part of the sky. You, too, are like the clouds. There is nothing to hold on to, and nothing to fear. Let go, and you will find that you have already arrived." As the words sank into his mind, Koji felt a profound stillness wash over him. For the first time, he stopped trying to grasp enlightenment. Instead, he allowed his thoughts and fears to drift away, like clouds dissolving into the vast sky. In that moment, he felt a deep connection to everything around him: the clouds, the wind, the earth, and the sky. He understood what his master had been trying to teach him. When Koji returned to the monastery later that day, he was no longer burdened by doubt. He still meditated, studied, and performed his chores. But his approach had changed. He no longer sought enlightenment as if it were a treasure hidden far away. Instead, he embraced each moment as it came, moving with the flow of life, just as the clouds moved with the wind. Over time, the other monks began to notice the change in Koji. He was no longer restless or anxious. Instead, he exuded a quiet confidence, a serene presence that inspired those around him. When asked about his transformation, Koji would smile and say, "I learned to walk on the clouds." Years later, the monks would often see Koji sitting at the edge of the western cliff, gazing at the clouds with a gentle smile. To him, the cliff was no longer a boundary, and the clouds were no longer an obstacle. They were a reminder of the infinite freedom within. Thus, Koji learned to walk on the clouds, not with his feet, but with his heart open and his mind at peace. He had found what he had been seeking all along, not in some distant place, but in the ever-changing, ever-present moment of now.